full screen has come now. Yeah, absolutely perfect.
This happens, the technical glitch. Sorry. Welcoming you all to this national level 2-day webinar on research methodology. And Dr. Sanchita Ghoshal has requested me to talk about mainly an overview of data collection elicitation techniques. And okay, so this is where research methodology, I think this is the paper in the Department of Communicative English. The students are introduced this course, research methodology, and it is also very good initiative that, especially in the initial level, students to get exposure that how to conduct let's say research. It's pretty good because mainly research methodology courses are taught in the advanced level, in the MPhil or PhD level. Nowadays, MPhils are also not there, but it's a very good initiative. So, thank you, IQAC cell, Professor Aditi Sarkar, and as well as Professor Indrila Ghosh for taking this initiative. So the background of the lecture, why is this lecture? Just let me tell you briefly. I think your Madam Professor Sanchita Ghoshal, I think she heard me once last time I was talking about research methodology, in one of the webinar somewhere conducted in JNU in the Russian department. And I also talked about, again, the very basic things, how to write a research proposal and types of research. Let's see, as Dr. Aditi Sarkar has already mentioned about qualitative research, quantitative research, mixed methods, and all that kind of thing. So I talked about those things. I think the link is all still there in the YouTube. So if you are really interested, you can get and listen. That particular. So it's a 2 hours lecture, so interaction with the students and all. So then Sanchita approached me for this webinar. So then after lots of discussion and timing and all that, finally we could reach a common time, today. So hope you all are well, because during this pandemic, as you know, that we somewhere one way or other we are having different kind of problems. You see. So thank you, the college authority, so the organizers, and also all the participants, the faculty, students, and friends and colleagues for joining in this lecture. And now, so let's say, what is the overview of this lecture? So what I'm going to talk about, you see, and so let me tell you very briefly that somewhere within 1.5 hours, one maybe less than 1.5 hours. So in the introduction part, I'll be talking about briefly about, let's say, this, so to say, field linguistics or field work. Why do we need to do field work? What is the history of the field work or field linguistics? Little bit of this, and especially in field linguistics or field work, definitely we need to collect data. Without data, either, let's say, you cannot validate a particular hypothesis, or you cannot also, let's say, somehow null and void kind of things, cannot do anything. So you need to have data. So data is really important. So how to collect data? So one of the methods of collecting data is the interview methods. And though there are different types of methods of data collection, whether it's observation method, interview method, and there are other types of methods. So today I'll be talking about all types of methods of data collection, but my prime focus will be interview method or interrogation techniques, you see. And then, as I already told you, that my experience, especially working with an informant, not only informant, as I conducted fieldwork in different Indian languages. So maybe some of the experience, practical experience working in the field, and some of the salient points, especially while we carry out research or collect data, some of the important points, and then some of the suggested readings. Let's say if you want to carry out linguistic kind of field work, so what are the things you need to read, some references, some kind of suggested readings I will try to also provide you at the end, okay? And then let's some questions and answers. So whatever the types of questions you have in your mind, please don't hesitate, you are welcome. And let's see if you, as you know that it's only 1.5 hour lectures, if you have, let's say, even doubts and queries and any other kind of queries in your mind, please reach me at hmray@jnu.ac.in. Okay, so I'll be available. Begin the lecture. Begin with the lecture. I would like to let's say mention these two important figures, especially in Indian linguistics. So one person is I think many of you, I think, know her, Professor Anvita B. Padma Shri, worked on many Indian languages. And I must tell you that I'm so fortunate that I was her student. And also, when I became faculty in the Center for Linguistics, JNU, so I had this opportunity or privilege to work with her in different Indian languages. So with her, I have gone to different places, whether it is Garhwal, it is Kumaon, whether it is Rajasthan, and different places in India. So I'm so fortunate that this person who was my teacher, and then later on she became my colleague, and such kind of experience working with Professor Abi. So another person, Professor Pramod Kumar Pandey. Now he is the Vice Chancellor in Deccan College, Pune, and Vice Chancellor at Deccan College, Pune, which is the deemed university. So Professor Pramod Kumar Pandey, he was my supervisor, and so somehow, so most of the things, let's say, it is whatever I'm going to present, it is not my own. So based on the experiences shared by Professor Abi, Professor Pandey, and some of my colleagues in the department, so I will be sharing with you, all that kind of things. So it is not my own. Try to understand that, it is not my own. It is kind of shared kind of experience with the colleagues, with the students, and other professors in the department, and as well as, let's say, the kind of readings so far I read so far in the last several years. So okay, so now talking about linguistics and linguistic fieldwork or data collection, and since it's a course research methodology, and in research methodology this is really important, data collection, especially how to collect data. And nowadays, as you can understand, this is the pandemic time. So even pandemic time, how to collect data, maybe for that we should have a different kind of data collection and elicitation techniques, and so for that maybe we need one more lecture. So maybe we can discuss that part later on. Okay. So now, so if you talk about, so to say, somewhere data collection and working on a particular language, whether it's a lesser known language, whether it's a tribal language. So, somewhere, so the ideal way to study language of a traditional community in situ, living with the village. So wherever the language is spoken, you have to go to those places and collect data from that particular place. So, and learning as much as the social customs of the people as possible. So this is Foley, 2002. And one of the prominent figure especially in field linguistics, language documentation, again, Professor Eichenwald. So Eichenwald said is that, the kind of, definitely we are trying to observe the language, but at the same time, you have to become a member of a particular community and often being adopted into the kinship system. Then, so the kind of other approaches, especially if you're a little bit aware of the linguistic tradition, what happens, the generative tradition is somehow, they do not go in the field, and they collect data based on their intuition as well as the kind of armchair linguistics point of view, and sitting on the chair comfortably and flouting theories and hypotheses and trying to judge or validate a particular hypothesis, using the intuition thing, so which is not possible basically. You have to go in the field, make your feet dirty for that matter, you see. So this is where really interesting, and so the field linguists or field workers, you have to go in the field and try to become a member of a particular community, whichever the community you are working on, whichever the language for that matter you are working on. Okay, so talking about somehow linguistic field work, and if you are related to linguistics and language things, so for data collection for the purpose of documentation and description of a language. So we are, let's say, try to document the language as well as try to describe the language. And another important part is that we have to collect data through interaction with speakers. And here I mean to say native speakers, you see. And data collection is in situations where speakers are expected to use the language naturally. So the kind of natural environment we have to have, not the artificial environment, okay? So This is Shobana Chalaya 2011. So now let's say, especially if you talk about the fieldwork and the tradition and the data collection tradition, it is mainly somehow, if you look at the history of this whole data collection and history of European colonization and history of Christian missionaries, if you know the whole history. So the colonial administrators, missionaries, social and medical workers, art collectors, and anthropologists. So they were working basically collecting, and the whole process, if you look at, it is the Christian missionaries who started this data collection process, and even their mission, if you were talking about, their mission was somewhere, especially to spread Christianity, and they are also translating Bible in different languages, different Indian languages or African languages. And if you go to somewhere in the India, Northeast India, so whichever the community we're talking about, whether it is Arunachal Pradesh, Shillong, Meghalaya, and other seven sister states, what is happening, you see, and somehow Christian missionaries, they wanted to spread Christianity, and at the same time, they to some extent, if you're talking about working on those particular languages and trying to know the culture of those particular languages, and so this is where, and especially in linguistics, this is one of the places in the Summer Institute of Linguistics, and we talk about Summer Institute of Linguistics, SIL. See, SIL basically is also known for Wycliffe Bible translators. So this, the whole fieldwork traditions. If you look at the history of fieldwork traditions, the European and as well as American traditions, so it was kind of Christian missionaries. They started this, and some people, so kind of gentlemen, kind of scholars of the fieldwork. We have seen later on that, let's say, someone passionate about a particular language, or some explorers or travelers, or military or colonial personnel, ambassadors, politicians, or simple farmers, or school teachers. So they used to carry out also kind of research or fieldwork also. There are many people, and in other circumstances, we see that fieldwork in unpleasant circumstances. Let's say there is a prison and prisoners are there, or maybe slaves are there, in hospital patients are there. So all this, some people, those who are interested, to collect data, they used to collect data from either from prisoners, from slaves, or hospital patients and all. So this is where briefly I'm trying to give you a kind of overview that the kind of history, what happened in the European and American traditions. But later on, if you look at the data collection, especially in structuralist tradition, whether it's a Sapir-Whorf or Boas traditions, all those structuralists, and structuralists are mainly influenced by behavioral tendency and behavioral thoughts. So as a result, so their methods of data collection was different. When Chomsky came into picture, so he questioned the whole methods, structuralist method, and because earlier the way we used to look at language was looked at something kind of it's a kind of set of behavior. But Chomsky questioned it, that language cannot be perceived as a kind of set of behaviors. Language is something else, you see. So it is somewhere, it's a mental, it's a psychological kind of phenomena. So that's what the whole intuition, the competence, part came into picture. So those who are aware of, let's say, you know this. So Chomsky questioned the whole tradition, and we had seen that after 1950s, how Chomsky's thought influenced the whole. It's not only linguistics, sociology, philosophy, and other related disciplines, anthropology and other related disciplines. Okay, so and now if you look at somehow fieldwork, looking at the American tradition or the European tradition, you will see that fieldwork is somewhere, it's really heavily funded projects. But I don't know about Indian tradition. If you look at Indian traditions, and we have conducted research in different languages, and fund, if you're talking about fund, and we do not have adequate fund, if you're talking about conducting research in Indian languages, that's another sad part. Okay. Now, data collection, and so the next part, let's say, in my overview, as I told you, that data collection and elicitation methods and techniques, and that is the main part of my talk today. And so before that, let's say, if you're going to collect data or elicit data, So what are the things, let's say, you need to know? One of the things is that, let's say, if you're working on an unknown language, the language may it may be Toto, it may be any, let's say, Garo, or whichever the language is for that matter. And you are a speaker of Bangla or Hindi, and you do not know Garo, so you need to have a contact language. So let's say your target language is Toto, your contact language is Bangla, and how you are going to elicit your data. So is it through Bangla or is it through Hindi? Okay, because you do not know Toto for that matter, because this is the target language. Slowly and gradually, you will learn the language, and our experience is that within 3 or 4 months, our students they start speaking in the target language. So it is better if you start eliciting your data in the target language. It is really good. So what analysis for that matter? In which language you are going to do the analysis? Whether the analysis is in Bangla or analysis is in Toto itself, or the analysis you are going to do in English or any other language for that matter. Okay, so these are the things you need to know. And the middleman or interpreters. So at times what happens? Let's say target language you are working on Toto, and and the person there, the target language, whoever the native speakers, they do not know. They do not know Bangla. Let's say. So you need to have a middleman who understand Toto and also your language. So at times we need to hire a middleman or the interpreters as well. You see, so this lecture, as I already told you, that it is not only in linguistic research. So some of the methods and techniques today I'll be sharing with you. It could be applied in linguistics as well as language, as well as culture studies and sociology and anthropological research, mostly in social science, disciplines. Okay. Now, beginning this lecture, Professor Dr. Indrala Guho has already talked about different types of methods. And today's lecture, I'll be talking about those different types of methods. So, which methods to use? Okay. So, which methods to use? One method is observation method. Sending questionnaire method. We know that these days, especially in your email, many people keeps on sending that kind of survey. Please fill up that form. Sometimes we do that, sending questionnaire method. Documentary source method. So how do you, let's say, elicit data document from documentary source method? So I'll be talking about this three briefly, and then I'll move on to interview method, and which is the main thing today I'll be discussing, interview method, and at the time of interviewing the informants and what kind of interrogation techniques you need to keep in mind. So those things also I'll be talking about today. So briefly, this is where there are four main points. So I'll be focusing on these 4 or 5 main points and some kind of salient points and my own experiences today. Okay. So now regarding the observation method, as you can understand that observation means we are going to observe the people or the language for that matter, and whichever the area you are talking about, working on. So the observation method, if you're talking about, so observation method, it requires good amount of the knowledge of the language under consideration. So if you do not know, what the people are talking about, what they are discussing, so what are you going to observe? That means if you work on a particular language, you need to know the language, then maybe. And it is assumed that the basic grammar is already known to the field worker or researcher. So at least you know the basic grammar of that particular language. So actually, the observation method is pretty good if you're working on particular language. Somewhere, especially in linguistics, we talk about the kind of area, let's say, social linguistics. If you're working on an area, social linguistics, then observation method is pretty good. So it involves participation of the field investigator in various social activities of the community life, active part of the day-to-day life, all these things. So basically you have a good amount of knowledge of the language and also the community, and grammaticality, even in social linguistics also, variability of linguistic constructions, and yes, no answer, reliability. These are some of the things. So sending questionnaire methods are also good, So what I'm saying here is that some methods are maybe for some whatever. So it basically based on your whatever the hypothesis or based on your work, what are you doing? Based on that, you have to select particular methods. So sending questionnaire method is pretty good if you are working on, let's say, some syntactic topic, and some of the things I have already mentioned here. Now, and also many places you must have seen that, in TV channel, different kind of prediction who is going to win this election or that election, or that kind of, so based on that kind of survey also, all those many TV channels, newspapers, they also do that kind of sending questionnaire methods also they carry out. They do survey as well, but at the same time sending questionnaires are also. And as I told you that especially in generative grammarian or generative tradition also, many people follow or adopt this sending questionnaire method. Okay. Now, one of the method is documentary source method. So, why this documentary source method? What happens that in many cases, what happens? Let's say you are working on a particular language, and either you cannot go to those places because of now. Let's say it's the Corona pandemic, and you have started working on a particular language, and you do not have the access to the native speakers. So, what are you going to do? So, based on your whatever the written materials available, on the basis of that you are working in. So absence of real speakers, either because they no longer exist, because especially in the language scenario, if you know that many languages are on the verge of extinction, so we have to rely on some kind of documentation, so they are out of bounds of the field investigated. So the published materials or whatever the literature available, or maybe some census reports, so based on that you see. So especially linguistics, historical linguistics relied on this method. The whole historical linguistic tradition, as I mentioned, the philological tradition, if you talk about the early tradition, for that matter, Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, if you talk about the way he has origin and development of Bengali language, ODPL, you will see that the kind of historical reconstruction he has done, especially in that book, Origin and Development Bengali Language, how Bengali language has emerged from other Indo-Aryan languages. So it's a thorough study. So kind of historical reconstruction you'll find in that book as well. So demographico-linguistic research. So as I mentioned, that published census reports, years books, and other related manuals at time researchers. So they depend on all this kind of materials. Okay. So and this is the method, interview method, and my focus would be the interview method today, and some kind of practicalities while conducting out, especially the interview in the field, let's say. And so interview method, and it is the widely used method for field investigation. So widely used method, and the field investigator or the researcher, whoever you are, can interview the informants with or without the help of questionnaire. So at times, what happens that you have to have the questionnaire at in your hand, and at times without questionnaires is also fine, but especially the beginning level really bad, you see. So we're going to the field. Our main object is to collect data, not to teach the people whatever the value system or moralities we do have. Okay, so there are many other things we need to know when you are talking about interviewing informants. When you are in the field, there are certain etiquettes you need to follow. Okay, whether you like it or not. So if especially in the time of interrogation technique, interview. So if there are some communicative blunders, then it's really very difficult. So what happened in many cases, we were in the field and we had to come back, and we had to go to another place to collect data because of our some of our inexperienced researcher. And it happens. I think many people, those who have conducted research in the real environment, they may have kind of communicative blunders either by them or by their students or something. You see. So don't try to make that kind of communicative blunders, you see. So in the interrogation method, interrogation techniques, one of the things we do translation, you see. So what, let's say you do not know the language, so you need to, let's say you are working on Toto. Since you do not know Toto, so what are you going to do? You are going to ask the informants, especially in Bangla, and the informant knows both Bangla and Toto. So you will say that, okay, there is a picture of a cat or dog or whatever. Let's say you say, well, how do you call dog, let's say, kukur in Toto. So he will give the exact word, or maybe some phrases or some sentences. So you give those things in the contact language, and at times, as I told you, with the help or without the help of the interpreter. Okay, so informants who has good competence in both the language, contact language as well as target language, and translation itself is a daunting task, as we all know that there are many aspects that from one language to another language is not translatable, but it's really daunting task. But there are some things, especially in linguistic research, we do follow certain kind of techniques. Let's say how to go into and get the real thing, and especially working, especially in the field with the informant, one is to explain the situation or the context of the utterance. So let's say if you're saying something, and as you know that language is not happening in the isolation. Language has always some certain kind of context or situation is always there. So one sentence can have different kind of meaning. Okay, so let's say I forgot the book. I forgot the book. Let's say it's simply I forgot the book, but it can have different kind of connotations, different kind of meaning at the same time, depending on who is uttering and what context and what situation. Okay, so when you are asking someone, especially your consultant, linguistic consultant or language consultant, so you need to give the context, and otherwise your informer may give wrong translation. Okay, so and the kind of things, let's say language also, different languages have different kind of grammatical systems. Santali, just I am giving example of Santali. Let's say Bangla for that matter. Bangla, if you are talking about third person pronominal, you have three kind of distinction: A, O, and she. There is a distinction. If you say A means the person is nearby. If you say O, it's not near, little bit far away, and she is also very far away. But Hindi, you have, let's say, two-way kind of distinction, A and O. But if you talk about English for that matter, it's only he or she. You have that, especially the gender he and she. So every language is different, you see. And you cannot get the exact thing. Whatever it's there in Bangla, if you try to get in other language, because every language is unique, every language is different. It has its own grammatical system, grammatical rules, and it functions that way. Okay, so you need to go and get into the linguistic structure of that particular language, So so somewhere, and these are some of the things. Let's say if the informant says there is no equivalent word in the target language. Let's say if a particular informant saying that there is no equivalent word in the target language, and you are doubting the informant that as if like he doesn't know. So do not doubt the capability of the informant. Try to understand this part, you see. Because the same concept might be differently represented. The same concept might be differently represented. It's not the same manner as I told you. So give a situation, use the word in a sentence. So instead of saying giving a particular word, you can give a situation, use the word in a sentence, and because every language, as I told you, that is different. Just giving you one or two examples. Even the concept of in and on, if you talk about in and on, depending on different languages, the concept of in and on is also different. Let's say on. So different languages in the world, you see that they also divide on. Is it on the table? But that they have a different kind of on. Let's say it's let's say above, on. So they categorize the whole space, and on the basis of that, they have different kind of on. You see. So, but let's say in English you have on, above. There are only few, but different languages I'm talking about. You have different types of on. You see. So, and also under for that matter. In also, So now. Another thing, especially in data elicitation and data collection, we also use this pictorial representation. At times we use picture. So when the contact language is not known to the informant, the pictorial representation is used, as I told you that. And slate and chalks, mobile phone, gadgets can be used to draw those items as well, whether it's a cat or a dog or some other items also, let's say. Picture can be drawn, but you cannot draw a picture of some abstract things you see, and for that thing you need to collect it from the sentence. So, and this method has many limitations, but yes, especially in the monolingual setting. One of our colleague and Professor Abhi's student Pramod Kumar, when he was working on Andamanese language, as you can understand, Andamanese spoken in Andaman Island, and there, so he was in the field for more than 2 years, and he was with the people in the community. So he learned the language of those people, you see, and so there was no interpreter for that matter. So he collected data on using the monolingual method, So in that case, the pictorial representation, as I told you, so you collect a particular object. Let's say you are in the field, there is a fish, you are fishing with them, and you can say that, okay, what do you call, and also try to know the nature or characteristics of the particular animal or whatever the items for that matter. So you have to immerse in the community, and then you will get to know the language and all, as well as the culture. So the monolingual method, it is very good, but at the same time consuming. Many people, they do not have enough time. And now here, this one thing, in interrogation, we talked about substitution interrogation. So what is the substitution interrogation? It is the substitution of various elements within a word or sentence, that will provide you with the various form meaning combinations. So this involves both syntagmatic and paradigmatic substitution. So make use of paradigm. So something like, it's really interesting if you know a little bit of linguistics or language kind of things. Let's say so there is a word, so syntagmatic axis. In one axis you have this horizontal, and another is you have vertical axis. So many executives really ate at a fancy restaurant, let's say. So many executives, for that matter, let's say you can replace many executives. The NP can be replaced by another NP. So he, for that matter. Okay. So make use of paradigm, substitute. Basically, you can substitute one thing with another. So the whole thing, especially in syntax, we talked about different kind of test also. So the paradigm. So people who are really working on, especially in inflection, also in phonemic contrast, let's say, you can use this substitution interrogation, morphological variations, agreement features also. To get into the agreement features, phonemic contrast, I cannot tell you exact details of all this because I have to talk about many other things. Otherwise, I would have given you example of all this, phonemic contrast, morphological variations, and agreement features. How do we substitute, and so let's say in phonemic contrast, something like pul and bul. So you substitute pa with ba, and both the words have meaning in that language. Okay, so phonemic contrast by using substitution interrogation techniques. You see, and associative interrogation. Another is associative interrogation. It's really interesting, and we do use this. Let's say it can be used to inquire about concepts, terms, and meanings, and other words that demand further investigation. Let's say roti, in Hindi it is called chapati, in Bangla it is ruti, and let's say you got the word ruti, and from there itself you can get many other information. It is the process, what's the process being needed, rolled or baked or cooked. From there itself you can get many other words or related things, related concepts for that matter. You see, the rice, even if we talk about rice, Bengalis are known for dal bhat, mach bhat basically, So rice, so let's say you got the word rice, so where is it cooked, how is it cooked, different types of rice, and we know that different types of rice, husk rice, flattened rice, and Rajbangshi, at least I know that in cooked rice, if it's a cooked rice, so you have different types of name also. Basi, Siddho, Panta, Marua, Kharkhara, Chira, even different type of Chira, Muri, Mutki, Moa, Gundaj, Chapta, Burgura, different types of rice. Try to understand that. So what is happening? You have one word, let's say. So from that particular word, you're trying to associate or associative interrogation kind of things, and you get many related associative concepts for that matter. Okay. So you may also get semantically related words and some collocational patterns for that matter. Collocational patterns, you understand what are the collocational patterns, So, and also in especially compounding a samaj, you will get lots of samaj for that matter, whether it's Bahupuri samaj and Dondo samaj for that matter. So endocentric or exocentric compounds. So dal bhat dal bhat, and there are many Dando Samas you can understand. So this is associative interrogation is also interesting. And one of the method, the paraphrase method is we also use paraphrase method. And after I talked about a little bit of Chomskyan revolution, how structural methods of data collection were questioned, and Chomsky's the kind of intuition techniques were used. So the paraphrase method was also used, especially in the Chomskyan tradition. And this is where, especially if you're working on different types of transformation, and not only transformation, also in social linguistic information. And this paraphrase method can also be used later stage. If you are done with the preliminary analysis of the sentence structure, and then you can go ahead with the paraphrase method. Let's say I'm just giving example, especially in Hindi, Ram ne Sita ko kitab di. So you are just moving the sentences, moving the words basically, and try to test whether the sentence remains grammatical or not. You see, Sita ko Ram ne kitab di, Sita ko kitab di Ram ne, kitab di Sita ko Ram ne. So you test this thing and ask the informants whether the sentence remains, the semantics, the meaning remains the same or something different. You see. So, and if he says yes, then it's okay. So, and to some extent, in many inflectional languages, Sanskrit and many Indian languages, Indo-Aryan languages, this thing is possible because we have case marking, let's say, and because of the case marking, even if you move the constituent from one position to another position, especially the sentence doesn't is not ungrammatical for that matter. Okay, so you can ask the native speakers, let's say, the intuition of the native speaker. Okay, and as I already mentioned about Chomsky revolution and the paraphrase method. So, and actually, if you talk about this paraphrase method, to changing this thing to that thing, at times, if it is not really educated speaker, it is very difficult, and even you need lots of patience for this, So you need highly educated, patient informant. You expect too much from the informant, basically, and if you are doing this paraphrase method. But somehow the whole generative syntax paradigm people who are working on, they use this paraphrase method, okay, of data collection. Now, cross interrogation and this cross interrogation is also interesting. You have to do this cross interrogation. Let's say you have a particular certain kind of hypothesis in your mind. Either you want to confirm the hypothesis or reject the hypothesis. So, what you need to do at times, you need to make some kind of wrong sentences, and you need to test that sentences whether it is right or wrong. Okay, but all these things you need to do politely, and it should not appear as if like you are testing the person. Okay, and it should give the impression that you want to confirm some facts. Okay, not to test the person, your informant, whether he knows or he doesn't know. Okay, so you may begin politely that you gave me this form, or you told me this thing. I think I did not record it properly, or I did not understand it fully. So can you please explain it again? What did you mean by this? It could be either it could be dialectical variation or wrong data. It depends on. Okay, so it could be dialectical variation of the wrong data. So the whole process of cross interrogation, you need to do this, politely, very, very politely. If you are not polite, amicable, and social, let's say especially, it is very difficult to conduct field work, and data collection, So these are the things you need to remember, And I must tell you that field work or data collection, especially in the field, will definitely make you a good human being. That much thing I can tell you. So now another thing is stimulus interrogation. What is this stimulus interrogation? And again, this is also used to test hypothesis. And so a field worker deliberately makes the ungrammatical sentences to check grammatical acceptability. So at times you make kind of ungrammatical sentences to check grammatical acceptability. Okay, and the informant is asked to give opinion and judgment on the stimulus sentence or word forms. So you just make ungrammatical sentence or unacceptable forms, and you tell that whether this is right or wrong, and you ask or request the informant that please correct me. And so it's really fun at times, when you do this sometimes you can make lots of humor, especially making a wrong sentence. If you say that, it's really fun basically to talk about stimulus integration, and since you do not know the language and you are making a sentence, and let's say, and it happens, let's say, even if you're learning Hindi, for many Bangla speakers, still it is very difficult for Bangla speakers if you're talking about the agreement rules. So they said, Ram chai, Ram chai pita hai, or chai piti hai. At times, many I heard Bengali speakers say Ram chai piti hai. So Ram cannot, Ram chai pita hai. Or at times many people say chai pini hai. Chai basically pini hai. Chai pina nahi hai. Chai is basically feminine. These are some of the things we do not know. So let's say some of these things you keep on, let's say, making new sentences, and then you ask or request the informant, please correct me, and so it produces, let's say, lots of humor at times. Really fun, at times. The next thing, and these are some of the things, working in the field, the kind of experience, and some of the pros and cons, and to some extent don'ts and don'ts, let's say. And so I'll be sharing with some of this, and as I told you, this is not only my experience, the experience of many field workers, and here in this case mainly I'm talking about Professor Abi, Professor Pandey, and Shobana Chalaya, and some prominent figures, let's say. So if you're working with an informant or your consultant, so you need to interact with the informant on a personal level, okay? And don't consider that your informant as a kind of a subject. In biology and other related discipline, as it like they consider as a kind of a subject. For us, they are also humans, let's say. Okay, so you need to be, interact with them on a personal level. Okay, and not only in personal level. Let's say your job is to write a grammar of a particular language, and you start discussing many personal things, and you are not working. So interacting with you on linguistic level as well. So both you have to have a balance of this, linguistic level and personal level. And how to get the most out of the data gathering session. So I'll be sharing some of the techniques, and also local surroundings. So whichever the place you have visited in that particular local surroundings, in the natural normal environment. So how to interview the informants. So some of these techniques, so I'll be talking about. So in the personal level, one of the things is that, as I already mentioned, that you do not consider informant as your subject. Try to be friendly with them. I won't say friend. It's very difficult to be friend with someone within a few days. But let's say at least you have to be friendly with the informants, you see. And so this is one of the things you need to keep in mind. And watch out for personal space. Why I'm saying this personal space? Because let's say you are collecting data, and the person, he maybe doesn't have time. He has his own work to do. Either he has to go to office, college, or let's say whatever the things he does, agriculture or rickshaw puller, whatever. And he goes to his house, and as a result, he cannot leave. He cannot leave you, and at the same time, and he's not interested at the same time because he has to go somewhere. So at least watch out some personal space when he's free. Then you can ask them, okay, if I come that time, would you be able to give me some data? Can I interact with you? So watch out for some personal space, And this is really important, try to understand that you are working on a different language, different culture. So don't, whatever the things you have, let's say, whatever the prejudices or ideas you do have in your mind, so do not underestimate another culture, their food, their drink, language, culture, and ethnic group. It's not good, let's say, and if you underestimate, and you are from mainstream Indo-Aryan civilization, have gone to a place, whether it's Tibeto-Burman area and other places. Maybe you are a boss in North Indian setting. You are not boss over there. They are the boss over there. So anything can happen to you. And you are not there to teach any morality, as I told you. Your job is to collect data, work on the particular language, you see. So Do not underestimate the food, whatever the food, because every culture has different kind of food habits. And one food habit, nobody can tell that this food habit is the only thing. Vegetarianism is good, non-vegetarian is bad. Who can say that? Every community has different. They develop these food habits and other habits. It's not only one day or 2 days, for many years or many centuries. So all of a sudden, one political group comes and says that okay, this is eatable and this is not eatable. This is not fine. Okay, so you are not a politician. Try to understand that you are a researcher. So appreciation of the informants culture. So try to appreciate the informants culture. So since you are there, and that's what we need to appreciate each other as well as informants culture. And the payment issue is also there. And especially in Indian setting, it's very difficult payment because I personally, at times you have to pay some people. Let's say those are daily wagers, laborers. So if you give them 300, 400 or 500 rupees at least because they are spending time with you. But let's see, if you're collecting a data from a professor or from a politician for that matter, he doesn't need money. And you say that, okay, I have a project. In that project, I have to pay for per session 200 rupees or 100 rupees. So that particular person is that, okay, you are paying me for this job. I'm collecting data from my language, and because the host prestige and there are many other factors that are involved there. So payment is not the option there. So you need to be very clever whom to pay and whom not to pay. Okay, so at times what we do, especially we carry some gifts, let's say. If it is a professor or let's say politician or village head, sarpanch, so we give some gifts, and so this is some of the things, payment issue when the informants at times informants are not interested. So what do you need to do if the informants are not interested? And there are some informants that are too interested. So they have seen you in the field, and especially it can happen to anyone, either male or female, and they're too interested. Then you have to be also careful that why he or she is too interested. So these are the practical things, I know. And the parrot syndrome. Parrot syndrome is something like, let's say, only for 1 hour you have collected data and you want to finish your everything, and within 2 hours or 3 hours, and the informant is tired, and whatever you are asking, and the informant is, let's say, like a parrot, kind of, walking out. Whatever you are saying is yes, this is this. So the parrot syndrome should be avoided. So our data elicitation technique should not be more than 1.5 hours or maximum 2 hours, and because everybody has kind of patience level, Even this lecture series, let's say it's 1.5 hour lecture, I can keep on speaking and speaking, you may not have that patience to listen to me, you see. So same thing, and the area what you are working on, because it is your project, let's say, or paper you are working on, you are very, very interested. The other person may not be interested, So the time, 1 hour and 1.5 hours, that is enough. So do not stretch it more than 3 hours or 4 hours, you see. So interacting with the informants on a linguistic level, and especially in the linguistic level, we always say that do not ask leading questions. Leading questions, I mean to say that you should not be the leader, that okay, this should be this or this should be that. Rather, your informant should be the leader. You are there to observe, collect data. So there are many researchers, they think that they are the leader, and they also lead. So do not ask leading questions. And your questions, whatever the questions, it should have a very good semantic content, the meaning part. Let's say you are in Rajasthan, and in Rajasthan you started talking about, let's say, talking about something which is not there in Rajasthan. There are many things are not there, and try to frame some questions, depending on that kind of semantic content, So they may not understand it. So try to infuse your questions with interesting semantic content, you see. And at times, linguistics, and not only linguistics, every researcher, every discipline has kind of terminology. So there are researchers, they keep on using that terminology. This is this, that kind of linguistic terminology, And so we try to avoid that kind of linguistic terminology in front of the informant, whatever the terminology. In linguistics, let's say, we're talking about the sound, whether it's bilabial or whether it's palatal, alveolar, pharyngeal. So they will be what is this pharyngeal? Then they will be asking you, what is this pharyngeal? Can you tell me what is this pharyngeal? So better avoid using too much linguistic terminology in front of the informant. Okay, so do not overload the informant. At times, what happens? You are asking questions and many questions, and informants are not able to answer, give you the exact sentence, and you say, okay, definitely you should give it. It must be there in your language. Don't overload. Rather, you said, okay, if you cannot tell it now, think about it and give me the sentence later on. Okay, and be aware of priming effects, the kind of parrot syndrome I talked about, the same kind of priming effects. So whatever you say, even the informants are also saying the same thing. So you need to understand that, be aware of priming effects. So the priming concept, especially in psychology, is really an interesting concept. So you have to be aware of the priming concept. And especially try different techniques for elicitation without alienating the informants. So not only one technique, you need to have different kind of techniques. So at times you need to observe. Questions are definitely there, and so that, let's say you have collected data for more than 1 hour and the informant is not interested, then you can say, why didn't you narrate a story in your language? So when he is narrating the story, that means there itself you are gathering data. You understand that? You see. So, and if you think that, okay, whatever the questions I have prepared, I want to fill up that question, and he is not interested. But rather, even in the narration and some stories, if you collect, there itself you will be getting many informations of the language. So this is really, really interesting, And at times, show your interest for non-linguistic knowledge, not only linguistics, at times non-linguistic things as well, non-linguistic knowledge. And somewhere, one single approach is not enough. You need to mix up approaches. Observation, as we have already mentioned, in observation, whether it's observation, document resource method. So all these approaches you need to mix up when you are talking about data, and it also depends on which area, what is your topic you are working on, So, but it's better if you mix your approaches. Because one single approach is not enough. Okay, and so while interviewing informants in the local surroundings, these are the things we have seen, and Professor Abhi and others fieldworks also at times it's pretty good. These are the practical suggestions. Professor Abhi also gives that if you are a man and you are a village, let's say in a village, and it is advisable to first approach the head of the household to seek permission to interview the family members. If you are a man, let's say, but if you are a woman, it is better approach the women first. The male should not approach the female first, especially if you are a male and going to a new place and approaching a female, so they may take in a different way. Because why I'm saying this happens with us, talking about the personal experiences with us. I won't tell you that many anecdotes, I can share many anecdotes, but somewhere if you follow these techniques, it is better. Definitely, there is nothing wrong also if a man approaches a woman, let's say, there is nothing wrong, but somehow if you follow it, it is better, you see. And unnecessarily, we do not want to invite crocodiles at our house, you see, and it happens, you see. And once, let's say, you are in the field, so always begin by describing your aims and objectives to the informant. That what is your aim and objective? What are you going to do? And whether you're going to write a grammar or document the language, or it is your whatever PhD, MPhil, or some kind of MA dissertation, whatever you are doing, so you tell this thing, clearly and candidly that this is what I'm going to do, you see. And start with direct questions regarding the background of the informants. Let's say name, village, parents, brothers, siblings, education, etc. These are the things. But there are some sensitive things are also there, especially in Indian scenario, caste, let's say. So mainly we avoid asking caste-based information. But let's say if someone is really interested to give caste names and all, son names and all, you can add it. But somehow initially you do not say that, okay, what is your caste, otherwise you may land in trouble also, or there are many other reasons also, or maybe these people may see you in suspicious eyes as well, so there are things you need to keep in mind, and it depends on different place where you are, and the location of the interview is also important, so, and where are you, because it's a new place. So which kind of public place, whether it's a dhaba, it's a marketplace, shop or tea stalls, So where are you? It depends on that also. Let's say, especially if you are working on phonetics and phonology, so you need a kind of secluded place, where no sounds are there. You are working on acoustic analysis, So you need a secluded place. But let's say those crowded places are also good because there are many people who are asking questions, observing people. So social linguistics research, stylistic variation, even for acceptability judgment tasks also is also good if you're working and especially in public places, it's also good. So that's what I'm saying. So if you say that this place is good and this place is bad, it's not like that. You see, depends on which area of linguistics or language you are working on. Depending on that. So the location of the interview also does matter. Okay, and this is where, especially in the village setting, we say that try to complete your interviews before sundown, before sunset, and village setting. And let's say in the metropolitan city or city settings, 8 p.m. But I say 8 p.m. is also too much. 7 p.m. or depends also. And always you need to ask these things to your informant that when he or she is available and when she is free. And as I already mentioned about the personal space, you say, and so it depends. You see, and this is where do not criticize, oppose, or contradict the informant while interviewing, even if you totally disagree with their views. Do not criticize, oppose, or contradict. Do not lose yourself in trivial issues. Let's say some kind of political issues are discussed there. And you are also part of the political issues, giving your expert opinions, and there are many other things, So unnecessarily don't lose yourself in those trivial issues. Maybe those are really, really pertinent issues, whether it's a national issues or international issues. But your main aim, because you are there in the field for 10 days, 12 days, or 1 month, or whatever, whichever the time. So your job is to collect. So don't indulge yourself. Otherwise, you will land up, yourself in different problems. You see. So this is what we suggest. We recommend and no interview should last more than 2 hours per day, as I already told you initially. And so I'll take 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, Sanchita. Then I'll wind up. Okay, Sanchita. And okay. So. And also talking about the record, you see, and you need to record the interview session. You need to record the interview session, provided your informants do not object, has consent for this. So try to understand that, recording, so without the interviewer's consent, you should not record it. At least before recording, you should say that, yes, for this I would like to record. So do you object or do you have the consent? Then you can go ahead, you see. So this part you need to remember. So don't do it kind of in a hidden manner, you see. So this is one part. Now, and these are the things, as I told you, politely, ask the informant politely that you would request him to repeat the sentence or words many times, for which he does not mind. So you need to be very polite. You see, it's a new language, it's a different language. There are certain things you did not understand because the sounds are different, the words are different, the sentences are different. You do not know when a word ends or when a word begins. You do not know. So you would like to request the informant, please repeat it. So this thing, you should not be a boss, you see. You may be a top, you may be a principal, you may be a teacher, or maybe whoever is the person, big shot in your place. But in the field, these are the things you need to keep in mind, So you have to be polite, and then you may get the real data, you see. So interviewing informants in the local surroundings, and I think these things, as I have already mentioned, the linguistic things as well as non-linguistic features. Some of the things what happened, linguistics as well as non-linguistic things you have to be aware of. And see, language is not only about the linguistic structure. At times, language is also outside the linguistic structure. There are many other things. That's what the role of context, as you are talking about. So when you are talking about language, so speakers' attitudes are also there. His perceptions are also there. It's also there in the way his tones are also there. So some of these things you need to, let's say, make note of all these things. This attitude, surroundings, verbal interaction with other members of the society, how he interacts with, let's say, he's a sarpanch or pradhan or panchayat. So how is interacting with others? Let's say others. Let's say in his family or someone else. What kind of languages he uses when he's talking to a servant? What kind of languages he uses? So the main point is that the recorder cannot capture everything. So there are certain interesting things you have noticed. Please make note of all these things, okay? So because not necessarily that may help, that may be helpful, but in future that may be really helpful. The later stage of your data, of your elicitation, of your writing dissertation or something, and this is what I already told you that one should be prepared for next session of or next interview. So, so you the whole day, then you do not know since you have collected some data and you have to be, to be very relaxed manner. Okay, and I do not know the questions what to ask. So at least be prepared for your next sessions. You have to have questions in ready. If you think that okay, in the field I will frame some questions, then I will ask the informants. What are the things. This is not going to help you. So at least you have to have some questions in your mind. Yes, at times in the field, definitely you can make some questions extempore. That's not a problem. But some kind of questions you need, beforehand, and following certain paradigms and all. Okay, and especially if you're working on phonetics, talking the sounds and acoustics, it's advisable to get a soundproof room or less noisy environment. I think I have already told you. Switch off the electrical appliances, fans, tube light, and etc. Because it also generates kind of frequency, and as a result, if you're trying to analyze the sound in the software, it gives you lots of that kind of noise. So that's what we're working on phonetics and phonology, and these are the some salient points of data collection, and so one of the collecting and organizing data, and so recording, as I already told you, recording in one of the thing you need to ask the informants. So whichever the recorder you use nowadays, whether the recorder, your mobile phone is nowadays also very good recorder. So whichever the recorder, but before recording, please ask their consent. And there are many people they use loose sheet, like they do not know, like writing today here and writing tomorrow somewhere else, and they forget things. So at least maintain a separate register for the data gathering session. This is my register. Also write date also. And share your data after every session. And at times we write pen, pencil, markers, different colors also. Let's say the whole things. And what to believe. Let's say. So since it's a new language, you do not know anything about that particular language. So can you believe everything a person says? You can say yes, we have to believe, so we do not have any other option. But to some extent, also you can cross-check your data. You need to cross-check your data with other informants. So whether the person is saying right or not. So if you cross-check with other informants, then you get to know that whether this is right or this is wrong. And leading and priming effect can result in inaccurate data collection, as I already told you. So you have to be very aware that whether the person, your informant, under the influence of that priming effects, or you were acting like a leader, and as a result, he has given you inaccurate data. So that thing you have to be also aware of. And at times, what happened? Another thing is the traditional grammar and its impact. What happened? If you look at this, so mainly, if you are working on a lesser known language, so this is the prestige attitude is there. Many people they think that, let's say you are working on a lesser known language, and whichever the language, let's say in a particular variety. So people think that you are asking something, so they are trying to give you the standard language, but you are not working on that particular standard language. So they want to give the standard their data in that particular standard language. You see, so and this the whole thing and the traditional grammar and its impact. So let's say in Bangla, if you talk about the plural marker. Bachan, ek bachan, di bachan, and bahu bachan. In Bangla, there is no di bachan, but Sanskrit has, so to say, di bachan, and traditional grammars also will write, di bachan, But in Bangla, there is so try to avoid that kind of traditional grammar and its impact. So you have to be aware of, and also let's say speech register, speech also difference, kind of differences. We have seen that. So careful speech register. So carefully someone is speaking, not carefully someone is speaking. So you get different kind of register. So these are the things also you need to keep in mind. And a writing system can also have kind of influence on the data, depending on the writing system. So people, let's say in Bangla also, there was a time, if you're talking about the writing system, especially Bankim Chandra Chatterjee and others, that Sadhu kind of language, Sadhu Bhasha, and still many people they do write. Let's say Ananda Bajar Patrika, Sampadak, you will see that Sadhu Bangla. So what I'm saying that writing system can have also also influence on the data. So you have to be aware of, so some of these things, okay, and since some people are especially BA students and some MA, let's say, and please remember when you are collecting data from the informant, these are some of the informations you need to keep in mind. Let's say there you definitely you remember that okay, this is the name of the person and that, but you need to make note of all this. The name of the informant, sex, male or female, age, what is the age group, what are the languages known, whether it's only mother tongue, and also maybe you can divide into mother tongue and other tongues also. You see languages known, occupation, social class, and date and place of birth also, because that has also influence. Date and place of birth, like let's say someone is from another country and his grandmother and grandfather has visited or shifted to another country. So this also can have a different kind of a language kind of variety. The location, time, and date. So these are the things. Please remember, and in your register mention all these things. Introductory procedures to keep in that thing as well as in mind. And as already told you, gender, age, and also whether the informant is monolingual or bilinguals, and number of informants. Number of informants also depends also how many number of informants you are going to collect data. Especially in our field method course, we always say that students that at least 40 to 50 informants you need to collect data from 40 to 50 informants. And also amount of schooling and educational background also because okay. So these things also you need to keep in mind, amount of schooling and educational background at the same time. Okay. So and it depends on which area you are working on. Especially we at times what happens, we go to the field, we go to the school or the colleges because we get many students and also teachers, but initially we try to avoid teachers because you see teachers are preachers, they keep on preaching also. So we do not need preachers, but rather we need informants, you see, and also choose male and female informants both, and all age groups, but not below 12. Depends on even less than 12 is also good, depending on which area you are working on. Let's say if you are working on child language acquisition, how children acquire a particular language. So then below 12 years, definitely it is fine, So it depends on which area, what is your area of interest, you see, and this is where quoting Vita B, she says that let's say informant, you have collected data from many informants, 100 informants, and those 100 informants are not willing to participate with you, and they have given you data which are not sufficient or maybe wrong or inaccurate data. So what is the need for that, So what she says that one willing informant is better than 10 unwilling ones, So bad ones or 10 unwilling ones, you see. So you have to have and if you're lucky, definitely you are going to get very good informant. And not only that, the kind of do's and don'ts I told you, a bad informant can be a good informant, you see. It can also happen, you see. So and fieldwork can be extremely rewarding if one selects the right informants, and equally painful if one selects the wrong informants. That's what we have the experience, working with both kind of informants, And it's generally a good idea to select an informant with the same gender as the field worker. So if it's a male, try to select the male. Female, try to select the female. But let's say, and especially in the class, I told you that if there is a female and collecting data from male, so make sure there is another female or there is another male, and maybe you can go there in a group, not alone, and these things happen because as you can understand that people may have different kind of interest, either sexual interest or other kind of manipulation and something else, you see. So you have to be a little bit aware of all that kind of things, and so you have to be comfortable as well as you need to make, kind of feel comfortable to other informants as well, try to make the environment amicable, you see. And So there is no general rule for determining the age of the optimal informant, because all ages have advantages and disadvantages in a given situations. As I already told you, that all ages, whether maybe uh, below 10s are also fine, above 10s are also fine, depending on which area, what is your topic you are working on, from that, ages. And the participatory character, you have to be very, very participative in the community life, and try to be friendly, as well as already mentioned. Patience on the part of the, so this is commitment and participations also. So let's say you're collecting data and there is a kind of rituals, something is going on, and you say that, oh, my community, we do not have that kind of rituals, so you will start kind of criticizing the rituals, some whatever. So this is not good, so rather try to participate, and even if you do not like, that's a different case, but try to participate, in the field. So inside of the language and insights of the speech community. So if you participate, you can get either the insights of the language as well as the speech community. And there are many other things you will get to know about the culture, you see. And so linguists who are participatory observers who can break the social circles of apprehensions, who have a good knowledge of the discipline and possess the basic knowledge of areal features of the language under investigation, make good field linguist, you see. So you have to have basic knowledge of areal features. I'm talking about the linguistic areal features and other features, let's say. So then you are definitely a bit good field linguist or field worker. So your data collection will be really good. And so this is one. And another thing, just this is the last slide. And so theory independent. So because your research is whether you are driven by inductive generalization or deductive generalization. So what happens? There are some people, they are so rigid in their approach. So there are certain kind of theories they have in their mind, and they are like they're proving their theory and collecting data, to prove their theory. No, you should be open-minded and should not hang on a particular theory, whichever the theory, whoever proposed that particular theory, whether it's a Chomsky or whoever, for that matter. So you should not have theory kind of blind. So theory dependency blinds the fieldworker hands and restrict the vision. And so as a result, you are restricting your vision also. So this is where we always say, and so especially in linguistics, so you need to have good training in linguistics and good all-round linguistics, at least the areas like phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and plus sociolinguistics. So at least you have to have a kind of good training, and typological and areal features. You need to know grammatical things, and so for that, if you're interested, and the books like Basic Linguistic Theory by R.M.W. Dixon, it's a pretty good book. So you can read those things. You see, field linguists should have enough freedom, and they can write new theory befitting the data rather than fitting the data to the theory. Try to understand that it's not your job to fit data into theory, but rather, depending on the inductive generalization, you can either validate a particular theory or refute a particular theory. That's what I already told you, that you should not have, it should not be theory independent, theory dependent, or theory blind for that matter. Okay, keep that thing in mind, and we had seen that, the theory. So and these are other points to keep in mind. Prepare for your session as much as possible. So the questionnaires and other things, you need to prepare this, and try to double check your data whenever possible. Whenever you get time, try to double check your data with that same informant, and as well as with other informants as well, because you never know, because you cannot believe whatever the person is saying. So you need to double check your data, you see. So this is where one piece of advice. And I think I have already told you, informants should be encouraged to use ample of examples, illustrations, and also you should have some kind of confidence and reliability with them. So confidence and reliability, and allow them to also narrate story in their language. I already told you that, let's say, if they're narrating a story in the language, and because you have enough information, you have gathered enough information in that particular language, you see. And and especially in fieldwork, Dr. Professor Indrila Guho, initially she talked about some ethical issues. To talk about the ethical issues, I need at least 2 hours. I cannot talk about the ethical issues now, but there are many ethical issues that are concerned. When you are talking about fieldwork, when you are talking about research, So there are many theoretical, practical, and ethical issues involved in language selection, data collection, data management, interaction, and working with consultants, language analysis, and linguistic description. So there are many other things. Just as I told you that I teach this course, Phil Linguistics, in one semester, and then followed by another course, writing grammar. You see, and it's almost 1 year course. So I'm trying to tell you some basic things. You see, and especially when we work on a particular language, which of the language, lesser known language, there are two different approaches. One approach is top down approach, another is bottom up approach. Especially somewhere we follow, let's say, if it's a totally new language, stage one, we start with the basic word list. The word list, given by Maurice Swadesh, and Professor Ranvita Abhi has also developed some word list. Depending on that, we collect some words, then again collect some new words, try to get the phonological structure, then move on to the morphological paradigms, and then try to make simple sentences, and then complex sentences, and then let's say slowly and gradually, once you get to know the language, little bit of its grammar and all, so we move on to social linguistics and pragmatics and other factors. You see, so different stages are data collection. So top-down approach and bottom-up approach. Somehow we're following the bottom-up thing, and many people in the tradition, they follow the top-down approach. Is also, so beginning with, let's say, social linguistics or pragmatics there. So they have especially told the informant, please narrate a story. They narrated the story, decoded the story, and from there they're trying to get into the phonetics, phonology, then moving to morphology, syntax, and other things. You see, so there are many people either who are working the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach. Depends on, but for us, we follow this, beginning from this, and then move on to the above or higher constituents in the language. You see, and so somehow, so what I have discussed so far today in the class, as especially in this lecture, very short time. So thank you. So this is the things. Let's say simply introduction, fieldwork and history, little bit of it, data collection and elicitation, little bit of it, and working with the informant, the kind of experience I had, and some kind of salient features, salient points in the fieldwork, and the interview methods and interrogation techniques. So many more things. Let's say ethical considerations could not be discussed, and grammar. Gathering techniques, let's say, differently depending on which area of grammar you are working on, either phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, social linguistics, pragmatics, or let's say discourse analysis, which area you are working on. Especially if you're working on lexicons, I am talking about, let's say, dictionary. So how to make a dictionary, and for that thing, we have different kind of software also. We orient the student in different software. There is a very good software now, Language Explorer. We give them the training and to write, let's say, dictionary, multilingual dictionary in those languages, you see. So there are many more things to discuss, and especially talking about data collection, data gathering, depending on the topic you are working. So I think this is all for today, and these are some of the suggested readings. If you are really interested, you can get those readings. I just enlisted. I have the soft copy and hard copy as well. If you want any of the books or articles, I can send you. So my email ID is there, hmray@jnu.sc.in. So with this brief note, once again, I would like to thank the college authority, Basanti Devi College, Dr. Sanjita Ghoshal, Dr. Indrila Guho, Dr. Aditi Sarkar, and all the audience participants, my friends, colleagues, and students who have listened to me. Thank you so much for your patience. So if you have any questions, any doubts, anything for that matter, you can get back to me. Thank you. It's over to you, Sanchita.
Thank you, sir. We are so honored and fortunate to have you amongst us. I was absorbed from the first to the last slide. I'm sure our participants have also benefited greatly, as well as they have enjoyed your presentation. We do not have any questions till now, so I would request my students and the participants to post any questions if they have. But we have a few comments. I will start with them. So there is one request from Ashmita, if you could please share the PPT. So as I had said that most of the audience, I'm sure they were wrapped and they would like to have the PPT, sir, if you could share that with us.
Sure, Sanjita, I'll share the PPT with you and you can share with the audience, okay?
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, I would like to introduce myself. I am Nadia. I'm a member.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, sir. It's okay. That's completely all right. I should have introduced myself earlier. There is another person called Amitabh Sardar, and he's saying that it was a very nice presentation. David has said it was a very good presentation. So we have these comments coming up in YouTube. Any of my students have any questions, you can post them here. Sir, I have a question.
Please, Saida Nadia, please go ahead.
Yes, I was an informant in one of the survey that was conducted by the University of Calcutta, and when they were asking me questions one after the other about my there was a time when I was actually going through that parrot phrase where I was just giving off answers to get rid of them. So this has happened with me. So I completely recognize that part. But as you said, you have to keep the time limit. The time has to be limited. You cannot go on asking questions to the participants. But there was another thing which I went through, that is, in spite of my mother tongue being Urdu, what I could feel that when I was asking my mother the same question, she was giving a different answer. So my mother and I, even though we live in the same family, we were giving different answers to the same question. So this thing that you get different data from different people, how do you deal with this, sir, when we are recording data?
Yeah, so Nadia, as I told you that, see, all of us are different, and as well as talking about the language variety, whichever the variety we speak, you see. So your mother, whichever the educational background and the kind of people she interacts, you see, and your, let's say, people Kotari are different, in compared to your mother. So as a result, so language, as you can understand, is a kind of identity marker. The variety is totally different. So we have different kind of idiolate for that matter. You see. So what happens is that that's what. So the whole understanding, the generative understanding is that though there are differences, the surface level differences, variations, but the languages, if you look at the underlyingly, let's say the deep structure, so the rules are almost same. You see, so the variations are in the different level. Let's say the lexical level. I can tell you. Let's say so in the lexical level there may be some variations. So maybe as you have mentioned about Urdu, or maybe in the phonetic level. So the word Bukhar, so maybe you are pronouncing the word Bukhar, let's say simply that kha, and your mother must be pronouncing that Bukhar with the kha, let's say, pharyngeal fricative. So, so that phonetic variation, the lexical variation in a particular sentence could be, let's say, you are using, let's say, in a sentence kind of either mixed code mixing or code switching at times, mainly code mixing too much. Maybe your mom is not code mixing to some extent because she trying to use language or the proper Urdu, Hindi, whatever you talk about. So something like the variations. To try to understand the variations are very much there, and the variations are there depending on the social class as well as the regional class, the variety. So the researcher has to pinpoint that. Let's say my data, my analysis is based on. So let's say I am targeting this group, and the group is the college group, or the group is, let's say, this is the group. Somewhere you have to generalize. Otherwise, what will happen? Let's say somewhere you will get lots of kind of confusing kind of data. So, but underlyingly, whichever the topic you are working on, let's say something, let's say you are trying to test a grammatical, what is the word order in Urdu or Hindi in simple declarative sentence. मैं खाना खाता हूँ. What is the word order? So whether you are this child or whether you are adult or whether you are less educated or more educated, you will have the same basic structure. SVO or SOV, whatever for that matter. मैं खाना खाता हूँ. I खाना object हूँ. Okay. So the variations, whichever the variations, it can be looked into, and you can sieve out the variations. Okay, Nadia. So that's not a problem. It happens. happens.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Yes, we do have a few questions from the other students as well. It's a question from Shayoni Nath. She's asking between observing method, sending questionnaire method, interview, and documentary source, which one is the best to collect accurate data?
Methods, interview, documentation, see, I think who is this person?
She's a student of semester 6, Shayoni Nath.
Okay. So, what's her name, Nadia? I can.
Shayoni.
Shayoni, see, I think I have already mentioned that there is not a particular approach or method which is accurate for data collection. So at times you need to mix up methods, at times it could be observation, it could be interview, it could be documentary source, as well as, the other methods I have already mentioned about, So which one is best method to collect or accurate data to some extent? Within these methods, interview methods are best methods, as I already mentioned. But to some extent, if you are working on historical linguistics or historical material, let's say, trying to compare Sanskrit with other, let's say, languages, whether it's Latin, Greek, Persian, and other languages or dead languages, whom are you going to interview? Because Sanskrit in India, how many people speak Sanskrit? Try to see it. Only hardly you will find that there are maybe 400, 4,000 or 5,000, or maybe it's a little more. So interview method is also, so there are cases, let's say, so documentary source method is good for data collection. Try to understand that, So depending on which area you are working on, let's say you are working on phonetics and phonology, you are working on the historical aspects of phonology, how Sanskrit, got those retroflex sounds from Dravidian languages, or Dravidian languages got retroflex sounds from Indo-Aryan language, whichever the hypothesis is. Now, for this thing, you cannot go back to that ages, let's say, whether it is 5th century or more than that, before that. Can you go to the 5th century BC? Can you go and ask Panini that what does he think? Panini is no more. He is dead, let's say. So, for that, you have to rely on documentary source method, whether it is Panini's grammar or someone else, let's say. But for other, where you have the native speakers and available native speakers, and their interview method is one of the best method. I can see one of our student, and I think that Prakash, he has also commented something. Prakash, how are you, Prakash? It's been good to see you, Prakash, if you are listening. Prakash in Central Institute of Indian Language, I think he joined. Thank you, Prakash, for joining. Kalikruta Prakash. Prakash, are you listening? Okay, anyway, Nadia, please go ahead, Nadia.
Yes, sir, he's there. I can see, but I think he's typing. He's taking time to answer.
Okay.
Yes, sir. He has written that's a thought-provoking and wonderful session. We have another question. Since we have fieldwork based on socio-economic survey, so there is another question from a student of semester 6, Drishti Banerjee. Just 1 minute, sir. Just take. Sir, she is asking, sir, there are some sensitive topics like love jihad in which proper research is needed to be done, but obvious that questions to be asked are quite sensitive and triggering, and also keeping in mind the places for field work. How to handle these situations? Like how to linguistically form the proper question so that no one gets offended and my job is done. So if you could respond to that.
Okay, so see, something like related to casteism, as I already mentioned, that casteism is a very sensitive issue. At times, we do not ask also what is the caste of that particular informant. But you see, it also depends on different community. I can tell you in India also, there are many communities with proudly they will say that they belong to this caste or that caste, whether they belong to SC, ST, and whichever the tribal societies they belong to. So, so the other thing is that you cannot hide information. There are many people, they want to hide that they do not belong to this or that. It is definitely understood. The your skin tone and your many other things. Let's say the way you talk, the way you dress up, and so related to Brishti Banerjee's question, that kind of sensitive topics like love jihad, casteism, martial rave, and all. So the question is that. So what is your question? Let's say I can understand these are very sensitive issues, but love jihad, it is made something like this recent phenomena to some extent. If you look at the love jihad phenomena and casteism, I don't think casteism is a kind of a very sensitive issue to some extent. Casteism in Indian society, it was very much there, still there. It is very prevalent. And also, if you talk about the rape thing and all other things, but what are you going to do, Brishti? That's the question. What is your hypothesis in your mind? Are you going to conduct a survey and try to look at how many people in a particular district they are, let's say, victim of casteism or victim of martial rape or victim of love jihad? And let's say you are going to trying to get the figure out of it. And from that figure, what are you going to get into? So, and so these are the things you need to frame questions accordingly, and then uh, prove, try to prove accordingly, and then go and collect data. And I'm sure, and if you go and interview people directly, let's say directly, I'm talking about personal level. Many people may get information. And other thing is that there is one more thing. We may not need to reveal the identity of the informants. Informants generally, especially even in scientific research, many times we do not reveal the identity of the research. So, especially the informant. So, consultant one, consultant two, consultant three, or something like that. So, their identity is also not revealed for that matter. But at the same time, you are doing your research. Okay. So, personally, you need to go to those people, and you can make sure that yes, whatever I'm going to do, no way your identity will be revealed. So that way you can address these issues, that kind of situations. Okay. And linguistically form the proper question so none gets offended, my job is done. So this is where I told you. And offended, there are many other things, especially the legal issues are there, ethical issues are there. So some of these things you have to take into consideration, before going into for some kind of sensitive issues. Okay, Rishti Banerjee.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have another question. Does storytelling method help us identify variations in field method? This is from your student Prakash, sir.
The storytelling method would help us identify variations in field method. Prakash, very much storytelling. Storytelling is typically very good. And we get to know the variations at the same time. One of the things about storytelling, Prakash, if you know that, especially getting the story from mainly from, let's say, those speakers old and aged, more than 60 or 80 years, more than 60 years or above 60 years, you see that so they use different kind of variety. And if you are getting a story or from the age group somewhere around 40 to 60, and the another age group, let's say, so I can tell you, you are going to get lots of variation. The same story, let's say, trying to collect the same story, for that matter, let's say in India, Sholay. Many people have seen the movie Sholay, or Three Idiots for that matter, and collect the same story from different age group. I'm sure the different age group is going to kind of narrate the same story in a different manner. And so that's what the storytelling is. It's one of the best way to get into the society, get into the variations. So many people in the social linguistic study, they rely on the especially on the storytelling part also. And especially in our field linguistics classes, we always tell our students that if you're collecting data from the field, at least collect three or four stories, because because it's a good thing, you see. And okay, good to know, Prakash. We'll talk later, Prakash, and good to see you. We have joined. It's been a long time. I think I taught Prakash way back in 2008 or 2009, and Prakash is working in Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I would now request Professor Ria Banerjee Ghosh to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Nadia Di. Good evening to one and all attending this webinar. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion as we come to the end of our 2-day national level webinar on research methodology organized by the Department of Communicative English in collaboration with IQAC of Basanti Devi College. On behalf of Basanti Devi College, Kolkata, we extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our resource person, Dr. Hori Madhav Ray, Assistant Professor, Center of Linguistics, SSL and CS, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, for gracing his important work and sharing with us his valuable time amidst his busy schedule. A big thank you, sir. I mentioned my deep sense of gratitude and appreciation to Dr. Indrina Guha, our very own principal madam, for her constant support. A special thanks to Dr. Aditi Sarkar, our IQAC coordinator, for her